Hey, John.
Yes, good evening.
Hey, we're not there yet. We're not live yet. But I just want to let you know we need a you need a mask on.
I don't want to wear a mask. Are you kidding me? Is this whose rule is this?
That's the CDC. The CDC has said that you must wear a mask in all public events. Yeah. Before you get on camera, I'd really suggest you put a mask on.
All right, I'll put a stupid mask on. I'll put one of these stupid masks on. Okay, let me know when we're live.
Yeah, you're live now.
I'm live now?
Yeah, I see that. And the mask is nice because it blocks the bald spot.
The bald spot?
You have a small bald spot. I'm not sure you know that.
Cuts down on the glare?
Yeah, cuts down on the glare.
Hey, I tell you what, I am in compliance. I'm wearing a mask.
There you go.
I'm wearing a mask. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Chapter 288. Welcome to our third virtual meeting. I looked up the word virtual in the dictionary. It says almost or nearly as described, but not completely or according to strict definition. I still don't know what virtual means. But I do know this. I miss our meetings. I miss all of you people and having you together. EAA is a big social event, as you all know. So I'm kind of picturing in Keith's hangar right now. So Keith, you're always over here. Thank you for letting us use the hangar. Doris, you're always over here. Thank you for letting us use the hangar for the simulator and the chairs. And Alan, if you're here, you like to sit there and heckle. And Les, you're usually over here. Now, wait a minute. Roofman, did you want to say something? Just a minute. That's enough. That's enough. I promise I'll never give Roofman the microphone because he never gives it back. But miss all you people. Hopefully, someday soon, this virtual requirement will go away and we can get together again. So welcome to the June 18th meeting. Matt's phone number is on the screen. You can text in a question to him and we'll...
it's on the website, too.
It's on the website. Oh, okay. Very good. Thanks. Thanks. So here we go. Mouse position. Click. There we go. Oh, yeah. Please, everybody turn off your cell phones so it's not distracting. I'm just kidding. I can't hear him. This is a big thanks to Matt and Dave for everything they do to make this happen. This is what I'm looking at back of Mac's head. And Dave's over by the camera, making sure I look at the camera. But we've got a great hangar to do this in. And without those two guys, this just wouldn't happen. So we're trying to do this virtual, trying to be social and stay together. And this really is important to all of us. So what's going on tonight? I'm going to talk some chapter happenings. We got some more submissions for the virtual tour. Lynn O'Donnell is going to speak about crossing the Atlantic in single-engine airplanes and some twins. And it's a whiskey compass and a clock. And I wanted to describe for people who don't know what a whiskey compass is. That's the little compass that sits on top of the panel of an airplane. And it floats in a liquid. And so we call it a wet compass. And we call it a whiskey compass because of that. So I'm not sure if that's two things, a whiskey compass and a clock, or if it's a clock, a compass, and some whiskey. So I'm just not sure what she did when she was flying those 12 or 14 hours across the North Atlantic. Craig, you're standing in my way. I can't see my screen. Thank you very much. Somebody tell him to sit down. Last month, Scott Seagrave, he gave a nice presentation about legal aspects of registering an airplane in Florida. And somebody asked me a question during the month. For sales tax purposes, how do you declare the value of an aircraft that you built yourself? And the answer that Scott gave was, it's the sum of the parts, not your labor. Your labor is, for instance, a hobby. So when you register the airplane and they send you this nasty letter about sales tax, you have to show receipts for what you bought. The fuselage kit, the engine, the radios, everything like that. And I will say, Scott mentioned last week that the sales tax people in Florida are pretty aggressive about this. And when we bought the Tiger, we bought it through Phil Gardner. About 2 months later, we got a letter from the tax people, and it's pretty, they $5,000 fine, double the tax. They were kind of relentless, made it kind of scary. So I gave the letter to Phil. He chuckled and sent them a letter saying they already paid the tax, and they went away. But they are pretty aggressive about looking into that stuff. So I want to say a big thanks to Chapter 288. I'm not sure if we're the largest chapter in the country, but we're pretty close. For 2020, we have 241 paid members, paid their dues for 2020. And there's about 50 who paid in 2019. They still call themselves members, but they haven't yet paid. But I want to say thanks for your support. And the reason for it, Craig Cousins is going to come up shortly. And this year's, some of what we do with our funds is, this year the race scholarship is a little bit different than last year. Headquarters is paying $5,000, and you, our members, you're paying the other $5,000. So thank you for your support. I want to say a big thanks to Craig. It's a lot of work to be the scholarship coordinator. And the 3 people who did the interviews, Craig, this is alphabetical order, Craig, Chris Martin, and Lynn O'Donnell. And it was a tough job. We had some strong candidates. They had a really tough job. So, Craig, would you come on up here and help and do a little description about this year's race scholar?
Mic's still on? Still on. It's still on. Okay. I'm here. All right. As John said, we had a really, really tough time this year. And the reason being is the candidates were so impressive. It was absolutely incredible. And I know there was a lot of soul searching with Lynn and Chris Martin over the candidates. And these kids are so focused. And they just know what they want to do, and they're going for it. And I wish I was like that when I was that age. It was just incredible. So our winner this year is Brendan Wixon. Now, Brendan can't be here tonight because he works about 80 hours a week at McDonald's, saving up for all of his flight training and other things. But hopefully he's taking a break and he's listening to the podcast here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. I've got a full page of notes here. I won't read the whole page. John won't give me the mic for that long. So anyway, Brendan, of course, is a return from last year. He did apply last year, and I think that was a practice run for him, and he did really well in his interview this year. He says his motivation for flight training started at the Atlantic High School. He joined the Aerospace Academy. He was a member of the Technology, Engineering, Science, and Aeronautics Academy for 4 years. He became the Academy's historian and attending and documenting all the events and landmarks. And this year, he was the senior class representative and a member of the Student Astronaut Challenge team. And, of course, he's a member of 288. He was on the RV-12 build project, so for 2 years as well. And he said on that particular project, he said, I learned many life skills such as leadership, perseverance, communications, and teamwork. In addition to building the RV-12, he was also dual enrolled at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University Private Pilot Ground School, and he already has passed his FAA written test, so that's really good. His goal is to earn his private pilot's license within the next 12 months. We want him to do it quicker than that. He's working part-time, of course, and he wants to go to the airlines. He's been to the JetBlue training facility in Orlando, and he's actually flown the simulator there, the A320. Well, Lynn will tell me that you just press a button on an A320, it flies itself, right? Okay. And this part I'm going to get through. I'm going to read this verbatim, and excuse me if I choke on it just a little bit. But during the 2 years I built the RV-12, I became close to 2 mentors from EAA Chapter 28, Dennis and Bonnie Powell. I looked up to them and considered myself lucky to know them. Dennis was the first pilot to take me flying in his RV-12 during a Young Eagles event. We departed Spruce Creek and went east towards the beach on a bumpy, overcast day. I can't help but remember Bonnie's words. It's that feeling when you leave the ground. It never gets old. So he just became really, really good friends with them. And they pushed him last year to apply to this, so it's good. He says also he'd like to become more involved with 288 and continue Dennis and Bonnie's legacy by flying Young Eagles and volunteering to chapter activities. Now, I'm going to show you what National does for it. So when he solos, hopefully I can do all this at once. When he solos, he gets his shirt. We still do the cutoff shirt. I'm holding it up high enough. So that's he gets that. He gets a really cool Ray Aviation scholarship hat as well. And when he passes his private pilot, gets a really cool polo shirt, Ray Aviation scholarship, EAA. So that's it. And so hopefully next meeting, maybe we can get Brendan here and he'll get up and introduce himself and away we go. So with that, John, I can hand it back to you. Well, I drop everything.
Thank you. That was good. Very good. All right. Thanks, Craig, for that review of Brendan. And thank you again for all you do, because it's people that volunteer like you that make this chapter so great, make my job easy, and did a really great job. And at our age, we really should be supporting our youth. So Craig and Chris and Lynn, thanks for your help on that. That's our website. Oh, but you can even pay your dues on the website. This isn't a real current picture. Rick changes his picture quite often, but please go to our website. There's some very interesting stuff on there. And like I said, you can even pay your dues for those 50 of you or so who didn't pay yet this year. The calendar is kind of thin, except for one thing that just came up. The Celebration of Life for Dennis and Bonnie is going to be October 10th at the Country Club, 2 to 4 p.m. That's Matt's number again if you want to text in, things like that. There's a phenomenal website that Becca, Bonnie, and Dennis's niece did. It's pretty easy to remember, DennisandBonnie.com. It's got a lot of good pictures, a lot of memorabilia about them, the story of their life together. And she'd also like you to RSVP if you intend on attending the event on the 10th. So one of the things on there, how to carry on their memory, leave a clean wake. And I guess that's from all the sailing days they did together. Don't make waves, leave a clean wake. That was one of Bonnie's sayings. So please go on the website. It's not till October 10th, but I wanted to put it out now so everybody can start making their plans for that. I've heard people were thinking about flying to Oshkosh in July during the week of AirVenture. If you are, headquarters has put out some, setting expectations. Some people were thinking about flying up there and meeting old friends and joining up and just having a good old time. They want you to know that there's very little facilities available. You're just about like any other itinerant airplane. So there's no EAA facilities or services available. You can park on the itinerant ramp at the FBO. No permit has been obtained for aircraft parking or camping. No access to EAA facilities from the airport. Camp Scholar closed. EAA didn't obtain a Wisconsin temporary campground permit. The museum will be closed, and all the external gates will be locked. So if you're thinking about just making a trip this summer to Whitman Field during the AirVenture week, just be advised that there's going to be limited support from EAA.
And John, Rick says this is also on our website.
Yes, that's where this came from. That's why down at the bottom you can see the EAA288.org. These instructions are also on the website. So what they are doing is EAAtogether.org. So headquarters is putting together a program calling Bringing EAA Together, and it's going to be for the 2 weeks, the 1 week of AirVenture. So they're calling it the Spirit of Aviation Week. So they're going to have a lot of virtual stuff again, showcasing the spectrum of flight in a virtual way. And they say you can share your favorite aviation experiences using, is that a hashtag, Matt? I'm a boomer. A hashtag EAA Together.
That's a hashtag, yeah.
Hashtag, thank you very much. My grandkids taught me that. So there's some things to do in lieu of going up to Oshkosh. Our simulator program, Jack Morey's doing a great job with that. It's a great time to get some training. Really good simulator back in there. So if you get a chance, go ahead and fly that around a little bit. So we're going back now to the virtual tour. We started out with what's in your garage, and we realized that garages are really toy boxes. So I'm going to start out here with, there's a secret. It's my big reveal from my toy box. Not many people know about this, but I've been working with Vans on an RV-15R, the R being a retract. So Vans has given me permission tonight to reveal what the RV-15 retract is going to be like. And everybody's gathering around the monitor now to take a look, and there it is. So that's an RV-15 Romeo for retract, soon to be released from my toy box. And
you know, John, have you talked to Rick about stealing his paint scheme?
Later on. I'll have more about this RV-15 retract later on in the program. So having updates on a few projects that we've already highlighted. John Poe, his YX, he's had the FAA inspection. He's done some high-speed taxis. Hopes to have the first flight in early July. John wants to say thanks to Chapter 288 because some of the members contacted him, went over to his hangar, gave him some good tips on building his airplane. It's just a 288 spirit. If you may not remember 2 months ago, who the heck is John Poe? One more time, John. John Poe bought Ron Vickery's house. So he's the gentleman in there. He's building that YX. It's almost done. He's almost ready to fly it. But I know there was a group of people from here who went over, gave him some tips on the airplane. He contacted them. So, yeah, that's what 288's all about. So, and Greg Ryan, we've been following him. Only a few parts left. This was last month on his T-34. This was June 2nd down at Lakeland at the paint shop. By the way, the owner of the paint shop, I don't know if you can see it on his shirt, but it's Foster Aircraft. The owner of the paint shop is John Foster. So he has the same haircut that I do, but we're not related. So there's his airplane, just came out of the shop. We were picking it up that day. And there's Greg getting ready to get into it. He's headed back to the creek, and his checkbook is much lighter than it was when he went down. So I don't know what this picture is about, Dave. Maybe you can help me out with this. Because we came back, you guys took this picture, and I was, is that Greg? What are you guys doing in that picture? But this was the day we flew it back, or Greg flew the airplane back. And there it is, out across from the downwind with a pretty good group of people. But talk about social distancing. No one wanted to get close to that paint job. Look how far we're standing from that airplane. Nobody wanted to put their fingerprints on that paint job. But the airplane's back. It looks great.
Is that Bob Curley's new airplane?
Is that Bob Curley's new airplane?
Yeah, because he didn't want people touching his airplane either.
Oh, he didn't either?
Yeah.
Well, okay. I think this was wrong. Look how far the people are standing from that airplane. Nobody was going to get near it. So, good job, Greg. Craig was just here, and if you saw a couple months ago, Craig had a good part of his airplane in his living room. So, what's in Craig's living room now? Well, he's had about 45 days to work on the airplane, on the avionics, the electrical. All the systems except the autopilot servos have been tested and configured. So he's really going great guns on his living room project. I don't know how he's going to get it out of the living room when he puts the wings on it, though. I just don't know how he's going to get it out. But, whoops, sorry. So that's his Dynon display in the RV that's in his living room. Coming along quite nicely. We featured Ted's airplane, his RV-10. This was taken today. They were weighing the RV-10 in front of his hangar. So he's really come along. He started this airplane in February of 2019, and you can see how much progress he's made on it. While they were weighing his airplane, they were also weighing Doug Gallman's Stinson. So I don't know how that one came out, but they had the scales together, so a little team effort there. And they were weighing Doug Stinson. And there we go. Oh, yeah. There's Matt's number again if you need it. And on to some new submissions, that airplanes we hadn't featured yet. For those that don't know, that's a Rans S-21. I didn't know what a Rans S-21 was, but now I do. Tom Egan is building a Rans S-21. Look at the date. He picked the kid up out in Kansas on May 1st. He waited a year to get the aircraft, drove out to Kansas with a rental truck, or I guess he probably flew out and rented a truck and drove it back. Took him 3 days to get it home, unloaded, 7 hours of inventory, and that was May 1st. Now, this is about 6 weeks later, and this is a lot of the progress, some of the progress that he's made on the airplane. So he's really going gangbusters on this one as well. And he says after only about 6 weeks of full-time work coming together, fast, this is not a quick build, but it's a quick to build. And he's going to put a Continental IO 340 in there, one that'll run MoGas. Expects to bolt it on when it arrives around 90 days. And I would say in 90 days, that airplane will be doggone near ready to go fly. Rick Weiss, his RV-7A. Now, this has been around for a while. It won first place in Sun and Fun 2017, but it's just an amazing airplane. 3,300 hours, 8.5 years to build it. 100 hours to paint it over 8 days. And if you haven't seen that paint job, that's just an incredible paint job. That was done by, I hope I pronounced this gentleman's name right. I got his first name, John. John Starr, Artistic Aviation. This is how he painted it. Now, Rick tells me that John is living in Oregon now, but he's moving to Love's Landing. So he will be very local to Spruce Creek. Rick sent me pictures of John actually laying on the floor painting and marking that airplane out underneath. So that That paint job is from this gentleman right here. So great job on that. And of course, Rick had to send me the RV grin. It's the required photo for the RV builders after the first flight. And of course, from Rick's perspective, it never goes away. So about the RV-15 retract, can anybody here say Photoshop? Because Rick presented me, that's Rick's airplane, and the 15 retract is Rick's airplane photoshopped. So it wasn't my idea. It was just my idea to steal his picture, like he reminded me right away. So good job on that. And what a great paint job. And of course with the, is that Apollo 11 in the background, Rick? Is that Apollo 11 lifting off right behind your airplane? No, Matt says no, it's not. Oh, well, okay. Anyway, that's our chapter. That's the spirit of aviation. We love our aviation. We love our people here. So please, it looks like these virtual meetings are going to go on for a while. So please send me some content like that, pictures of your airplanes. Let me know how it's going. Next, oh, there's Matt's number. And next up, I see her making her way over here. Put your phone down, Lynn. It's your turn. Squawk ident. You're on, okay.
Okay.
So there she is. Hold on a second. Let me see if I can get your... Oh, just before I come up there, remind you about the builder's log. If you are building, it's a great place to document your build. It's free. It's backed up. It's by headquarters, so you can document a lot of... And it's a good way of sharing your ideas and getting other ideas from other builders. So that's the builder's log. Rick Weiss is our webmaster. If you have things you'd like to see on the website, send them to Rick, EAA 288 webmaster at Gmail. He's doing a really good job of that, as well as painting his airplane. Okay. I'd like to introduce Lynn. Probably doesn't need any introduction. Can you get in the camera too here? Can we both? I think so. There we go. Anyway.
Both there? Okay.
There you go.
And you can hear me.
And I can hear you too. So as you see on the slide, she started out actually with the customs, but that's not up there. Went to work for Piper, systems analyst. She learned to fly with Piper aircraft. Her first job, what? Do this? Her first flying job was ferrying airplanes across the North Atlantic. Hard to believe. After 3 years of ferrying, she worked as a pilot, check airman, chief pilot, charter operations, commuters, cargo carriers. Landed that wonderful airline job with Eastern. And then the wonderful airline job with Pan Am. And then finally with United, and she retired as a 767 captain. But the best thing that Lynn did, other than flying all this time, moving to Florida, joining Chapter 288. So here you are, Lynn. Thank you for doing this. I'm going to get out of your way.
All right.
Oh,
thank
yeah,
you.
I didn't have to wear that mask all the time.
Well, thank you for letting me talk about this tonight. I have to tell you, this is actually almost ancient history. This happened in the 70s. It's so old that the first time I told this story, this is the medium that I use to show the pictures. I gave this to Matt and asked him to tee it up on the computer, and he just, he worked really hard with it, but he had trouble. So we did modernize it, and it's now on a PowerPoint. Are we okay? All right. But it is ancient history. To me, it almost seems like somebody else's lifetime. I do have to ask a question. How many people, raise your hand, know what this is? Oh, we got a couple hands raised. Next question. Who remembers how to use it? Oh, well, there's one hand over there. That's an instructor. Okay. This was the distance measuring device on our charts. But this is how I planned and flew across the Atlantic. Basically, direct pilotage, dead reckoning, whatever you want to call it. I shouldn't lean over. Okay. John did a little editing of my presentation. It was a dark and stormy morning. It was a dark and stormy night, actually, if you want to know the truth. They're working? Okay. But just to put a little bit into perspective, yes, I was flying across the ocean. But I was learning to fly in Lock Haven, Pennsylvania in the 70s. In the 70s, about 30% of the general aviation production was being exported to Europe, balance of trade, and so on. There were 3 ferry companies based in Lock Haven, and I knew most of the pilots. I was flying there. They all left on their trips, and they all came back. So it wasn't that unusual. It wasn't as a crazy a thought as people think of it. They were flying airplanes for pay, which appealed to me, and they all made it back. I had about 900 hours when I started doing this. I was looking for a flying job. I was asking all the ferry companies if they would hire me, and I think the answer was, no, Lynn, I don't think the customer would like a woman to bring their airplane. Well, the fact of the matter is the customer could care if a monkey brought their airplane. They just wanted their airplane. Why did they fly them across? They had an option of taking the wings off, putting it in a crate, putting it on a ship, getting it to Europe whenever the ship went, putting the wings back on, but then they had to deal with whatever aviation administration in the company to recertify and get the airplane. It could take 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months. If they ferried it, from the time it left the factory, the ferry pilot could probably get it to the customer in a week to 10 days. Same amount of money, basically, to the customer. We flew these from the factory, new airplanes, to the distributors. Mostly in England and Germany were the primary. Yeah, there should be a little comma there between whiskey, compass, and stopwatch. It is 3 items, not 2. Tech support, tech support. There we go.
I think the battery's getting low on it.
Okay.
So you might have to hold it out a little bit.
Okay. So that's the route. I generally picked up my own airplanes at the factory, either in Vero Beach or Savannah, took them to Lock Haven, Pennsylvania. That's the magenta line. In Lock Haven, where the company was, they installed the ferry tanks, the HF antenna, did all the paperwork, got a ferry permit. Ferry permit permitted us to fly up to 10% over gross as long as we were within CG. That may or may not have been happening, but there it was. When we flew to Bangor, Maine, where the airplane was exported, and then we flew up to Gander, Newfoundland, spent the night. And in the morning, would sit with the briefers in Newfoundland and Gander. They were the best. They had been advising and doing the weather briefings for transatlantic low-level flights, I think, since Alcock and Brown.
I think you're dead. Maybe try.
Okay. Okay, how's this going? Better? You're making it tough for me, guys. So how does one cross the ocean? What are the guts of it? First of all, one of the major things we had to do was check that the compass was correct, because that was it. The compass was everything. So we would swing the compass at Gander before takeoff, aligning it for east and north mostly. But you wanted to check it with your nav lights on and off. You wanted to check the compass deviation with the master switch on and off. VHF radios on and off, HF on or off, any deviation with the pitot heat on. Get in your airplane sometime if you have pitot heat. Turn it on and watch your whiskey compass swing. Check the deviation with all your beacons and lights on and off, and then make note of each of these. Because if any of these things failed en route, you had to know what the effect was on your compass. And do not assume that the card that came with the airplane is correct, because, well, we all know what they're about. For takeoff, oh, wait a minute. The rules, John loved this. He did all the corrections. He wanted him, his, and her all changed. You have to have a valid license, instrument rating. You have to satisfy an examining officer at Moncton. We had to go through and get an inspection that we had the knowledge, the meteorological knowledge, knew about air traffic control, search and rescue facilities, procedures, and they also checked our airplanes for equipment. We had to know, basically, they wanted to know if we had enough fuel to get there and back. Some gentleman tried to go up in a tri-pacer and cross the ocean, and they didn't let him go. Yeah, click. That was final. After 2 inspections, they gave me a blanket waiver to fly the ocean single engine and go to the next one. And then, of course, you'd file an ICAO flight plan. I don't think I could even remember how to do that now. Next slide. That's what the route looks like. It's a great circle route. Great circle route doesn't translate too well onto a flat surface or map. Next slide. Of course, the GPS, if you had GPS, what we could do these days, not like what I had, which was pencil and paper, input wrong coordinate and you would be off track and lost, probably. Your next slide. John did some of these for me just to see what it looks like. And the next one, he puts in some data, 1,720 miles, 20, I think you used your airplane for this, which was a Tiger. I took many of those across, Grumman Tiger. 12-hour and 35-minute flight with a tailwind. That was the flight that you would have. And the next one, that looks like a lot of gibberish, but this was my chart. What you'll see is the different routes, and the data on there will give you all of the positions. It'll give you the true course and the magnetic variation, then giving you your magnetic course, and of course the distance. Next slide. Those are the various routes down through the Azores at the bottom. The one in the middle is Great Circle. Then you could fly up to Route 55 North and cross. You could go to Greenland, to Iceland, and then drop down into Stornoway. Or you could go direct to Iceland, Reykjavik, and into Stornoway. Generally speaking, we took Great Circle route. Why? The weather predictions were better. The weather predictions to Greenland and Iceland, the wind predictions were not as good. And the fuel, by the way, was also $6 and $7 a gallon. So I never did get to the approach into Nursassuaq in the bottom of Greenland. I wish I had one time because I understand it's spectacular. And of course, with GPS now, it's wonderful. Up then, you just went in, there's 3 fjords. You hope you pick the best one and go and land. And your next slide. Before we took off, there were several things we had to do. Mostly we would go to Gander and wait. What are we waiting for? You can't just launch. You have to wait for things to be perfect. Now we're talking about the North Atlantic, so perfect didn't happen all that often. You had to have at least a 3,000-foot freezing level, because if you did get into icing conditions, you had to be able to drop down and get out of it, and know that you could get out of it. We took accepted crosswinds of the more zones that had crosswind, the less crosswind you would accept. Like 15 knots for maybe one zone, 10 knots for 2 zones. More than 3 zones, the most crosswind correction I would accept is 5 knots. Because the direction of the wind might be correct from the briefers, but if they're off by a little bit of velocity, I mean, you think you're holding a heading for an hour. And if you get it wrong, and then that just compounds as you cross. You didn't want any unstable air, especially on takeoff. We were very, very heavy on takeoff. We had to have at least 4 hours of fuel or 300 miles of reserve. On the other side, you didn't want it to be too windy at takeoff, and you didn't want too bad weather. Of course, you're talking Europe. You didn't want bad weather for your arrival, because you're going to arrive tired, exhausted. You can fly all night and arrive and try to do an ILS approach into Shannon. So what do we do while we wait in Gander? I learned how to drink screech. I learned to eat moose meat, seal flipper pie, pan-fried cod tongues. Got to visit the area and meet the people. Of course, now there's a wonderful musical, and the world knows about Gander, because after 9/11, that's where, I don't know, some 100 and some odd transatlantic flights landed there. It's a huge airport. It used to be known as a transoceanic plane tops. And everybody would stop there, partly because it was part way and partly because they had terrifically good briefers and they had cheap fuel. So it's a huge terminal and a beautiful big airport. They have a PAR arrival system, which we used to practice, where the controller essentially talks you in as though you have no instruments. And we would ask them to do that when we knew the weather was bad, and they knew what we were doing. So so you go to Gander and you wait. And a lot of times you'd be waiting and another ferry pilot would show up and another and another. And we've been up there with as many as 10 drinking screech. Gotta love it. What else do we need to do before you cross the ocean? Obviously, test your fuel system. You want to make sure that you can get fuel from all your tanks. You want to know exactly what your oil consumption is. That's why I always picked up my own airplanes and tried to break in the engine myself, so I knew that some young kid from, I'm not going to mention every riddle, or Flight International, but the kids would pick him up and they'd pay him a couple $100 to fly him up the coast, and they would lean him out and try to save gas and fly, without running it rich or running it full. So I'd like to break in my airplanes myself. The next thing you need, we of course do the compass swing, get your oceanic clearance, and then get your takeoff. Taking off out of Gander heavy was always interesting. Twice I had to come back and land in that heavy condition, and that was very, very challenging. So how do you fly the ocean? You go up and you hold a heading. Well, just look at the top line on this. This says the basic data for Great Circle. From Gander to 50 North, 50 West is Zone 11, and they're numbered. The true course, 067. Look at the magnetic variation, 27 west. That's a plus. So 67 plus 27, your magnetic course is 94, distance 192. And next slide. That's what my flight plan looked like after 11 hours of flying. And once again, this was happened to be a Grumman Cougar, a twin, crossing the ocean, 140 knot true airspeed. Same top line from Gander to 50 North, 50 West. We had winds 290 at 35. That was sweet. That gave me a 10 left wind correction angle. I still have the 27 degrees variation. Magnetic course 094 gave me the heading to hold of 084. So you get airborne, you hold a heading 084, in this case, for 1 hour and 10 minutes. Next one you hold, no, go back, thanks. You hold, the next heading I think is 091, and you hold that, in this case again, 1 hour and 10 minutes. At the position of 50 West, you make a position report. Remember how to do that? Position, PTA. Position, time, altitude, estimates your next fix. We had to do that via HF. We had HF radios installed in the airplane, and the antenna was a trailing wire antenna. So you'd crank it out, listen on the frequency, tune to the null, as they say, and then you'd have your frequency. The frequency are assigned to you before takeoff. So at 50 West, did we know we were at 50 West at that time? It happened to be at 2130. No clue. Had no idea. But they were expecting you to report at that time, and if you didn't within 15 minutes, they'd launch the search and rescue. So you have to make a report and say you're there. So we make the position on HF. The next one, you can see the first 3 positions there I made on HF. The fourth one, Zone 8 at 35 West. I couldn't get anybody on HF, so I called on 21.5 to see if there was anybody in the vicinity, and Seaboard answered me and relayed the position for me. Again, did I know I was at 35 West? I had no clue. Didn't matter, but you had to make the report. We didn't know where we were until at the end of the flight when the VOR came alive at the end. So let's see, KLM made a position for me, and I also have a note at the bottom, Lufthansa made a position for me. So we'd call them and ask them to switch to 2345, and then we'd chat for a while. They didn't have anything to do. I didn't know until I was an airline pilot how little they had to do up there. So they would chat with us for a while. What else is on this flight? We had 5 down at the bottom. You list 5 airplanes. We were all on the ocean about the same time. We were assigned 7, 9, 11, 13, and 15,000 feet IFR altitudes. You had to depart IFR from Canadian airspace. Were we at those altitudes? No. We were probably all between 9 and 11,000 feet. Of course, talking to each other. There's no radar out there. There's no law out there. You just kind of were out there. Down at the bottom, you can see some of my fuel computations. And of course, the next thing to compass and time was your fuel. You had to know exactly your fuel burn. Burn out of the rear tank there for a little while. That was basically to try to get your CG in a little better place. Out of the front tank for a while, and then I had a lot of back to the rear tank, and then to the wings finally. You wanted, when you landed, to have the tanks empty, if possible, because you had to take them out. So I had an 11-hour flight, 10-hour and 55-minute planned, and I had 15 hours of fuel. I came in on the 265-degree radial Shannon, and I'll tell you that's the sweetest thing in the world to see that VOR come alive, because you're tuning Cork and Land's End and everybody to see, what comes alive first. And to come in on the radial you're expected to come in on actually happened way more often than you would expect, being that we were just out there with winds that somebody gave us 12, 15 hours ago before we took off. But the guys were good. If you were very far off course, of course you had to make a report. Why were you off course? And we'd say, because we don't know where we are. That was not an acceptable answer. We would make up something. But yeah, it was pretty straightforward. You had to be on course when you came in, when they finally got you on radar. And then talking to Shannon. Halfway across, we talked to Gander. At 30 West, we switched over to Shanwick Control and talked to them. And they got all our HF reports. So what did we do while we were flying? Read a book. Talk to each other, have lunch, ask the other guy in the other airplane if he could pass the salt. Next slide, please. That's a younger version of me. That's my first flight. You can see in the back of the airplane is a 90-gallon tank. This is a Cherokee 181 Archer. In the front seat is a 44-gallon tank. That's my little overnight bag. I had a life raft and a bag of food. And you get in the airplane, you crawl over that tank and drop yourself into the left seat, which of course is full forward because there's a 90-gallon tank in the back seat, and you sit there for the next 12 hours. You can kind of see at the bottom is a little stanchion. That's the standoff for the HF antenna, which you had to remember to reel it back in before you landed or you'd shear it off. Next slide, please. There we are, 7, 9, 11,000 feet crossing the ocean, or not. There just happened to be 3 similar airplanes that day. And the next slide. There, I'm at 7,000 feet. The other pilot's at 9,000 feet. But to keep from being bored, we'd do a little formation flying. And you can see on that airplane, you can see his tank in the back. And the next slide, please. There again, you look down, you see it's another Cherokee 181. They were matched airplanes. That was my first trip. And you can see his tank in the back. And the next slide. This was another means of navigation. Most of the, because it was the eastbound transatlantic routes, because it was nighttime, everybody had left and was going to Europe, and if we see airplanes going our way, that was also a good sign, very reaffirming. And we would, of course, call them up and say anybody in the vicinity of where we were and see if that guy would answer us. And at night, we'd ask them to blink their lights. We'd make sure who they were. Next slide. Now, John's method today of identifying the airplane flying overhead is you just click on it, and there's the information. And boy, wouldn't that have been nice? Let's try the next slide. This is a little difficult to see, but what you're looking at on the left-hand side is the leading edge of the tapered wing of the 181. And the big white stuff are clouds, of course. All the little white dots, that's ice. That's icebergs. Little ones, big ones, fat ones, skinny ones. So we didn't spend a lot of time looking down. Next slide. Of course, a lot of these airplanes that I flew were registered in England, Germany, Switzerland. I took an airplane to Brussels. I took one to Greece. All kinds of different registrations. And of course, United States, ours start with November. The Germany starts with D, Delta for Deutsche. And this is an airplane I crossed with. And I didn't fly this one. It flew alongside me. So the guy who got this number was just thinking Echo Alpha Tango Hotel. He's not thinking about the Delta. And we had a lot of fun with the controllers when we'd call up and say, this is Delta Echo Alpha Tango Hotel. And there'd be like a long pause. Say again? My friend Alan flew this. He told the story a lot. Yeah, Delta Echo Alpha Tango Hotel. Anyway, when we got it to Germany, to the distributor there, we said, you might ask the owner of this one if he wants to maybe change his registration. And they just hadn't thought of it because they were just thinking of the last 4 letters. And he did. He did change it right away. The distributor, the guy who ran it there, spoke English quite well, and he looked at it and he just laughed. We fell down laughing. Next slide. I got to see an awful lot of the sky, day and night. I had one flight where I had 4 hours display of dancing northern lights. 4 hours of just dancing northern lights. Next slide. Sunrises. Who's familiar with the green flash? You ever heard of the green flash? I got 2 yeses and a couple of no's here. The green flash, when the sun breaks the horizon, if you have a very crisp, clear horizon, you get the first little bit of the prism of colors. Next slide. This is actually should be green, but that's what a flash looks like. It'll be like that. It'll look just like that, only a brilliant neon green. My camera didn't catch it. That's exactly what it'll look like. It is fabulous, but it's momentary, and if you blink, you've missed it. Sailors see this a lot. You see it at sunset as well, but you have to have an absolutely crisp horizon. And I only saw it once, but it was worth it. Next slide. Lots of sunsets, sunrises, clouds. Next slide. And the best part of all, when you get to Ireland, the 40 shades of green. This Irish girl was happy. First time I landed in Ireland, and I was down on the ramp, and we're trying to take all of the turnbuckles and everything out that held the tanks. The guys took the tanks out, and fishermen took them because these were beautifully made baffle tanks, and fishermen loved them. All the boaters loved them. But we had to bring back all the hardware, and of course our HF and all that business. And the controller said to me, because my first name is Mary, goes, Mary O'Donnell, you should be home making babies. You shouldn't be out here flying airplanes. Next slide, please. I think finding Ireland was better than finding a pot of gold under the rainbow. In the next slide. Those are all of my flights. Some of the great things I got to witness that you don't see normally. I got to find out what St. Elmo's fire was. Going through any kind of precipitation, I'd have dancing on the windscreen. I'd get the prop arc, and very, very interesting. Of course, the northern lights, greens flash, incredibly beautiful sunsets and sunrises. The stars over the ocean, because you have no ambient lights at all. I don't know how people found their way before, because I could no longer pick out the constellations. The sky is completely studded with stars. It's incredibly beautiful. Of course, we got to see other airplanes and talk to people. So beyond Ireland, and I got to go to Greece, Switzerland, France, Great Britain, Germany, Iceland, Greenland, the Azores, and Newfoundland. And I don't think I would have been to many of those places otherwise. Total trips, 52, 33 singles, 19 twins. When I started this, I had 900 hours. I was obviously looking for a job, begging for a job, and I could make more money doing this than I could being a flight instructor, especially in Pennsylvania, or even, which I probably should have done, is tried to get on with the commuter. But those guys were living at home. They couldn't make enough money to eat, and I was living good, working part-time. I started out with 900 hours total, 200 multi-engine, about 185 nighttime, and 60 instrument in-cloud IFR time. After 3 years, I had 2,500 hours, 700 multi-engine, 580 hours of night time, and 470 IFR time. That's when I started looking for an airline job. Two things to make note. There were many ferry pilots, several companies. We never lost a single ferry pilot to mechanical issue. We did lose them, usually. They had get their itis, went with maybe not the best wind, and they'd run out of fuel. It was just awful. And weather, icing. We did lose one guy down to icing. Actually, another guy went down due to icing. He was in a Mooney. He got picked up by a Russian ship. They took him to Italy, tossed him out. He had no paperwork. He had no money. He got out. He had a raft. We did carry a raft. We were required to, a little two-man raft. And he had a dry suit. So he was lucky. He lived. But he ended up, I think it took him like 3 months to get home, to get paperwork and have things arranged. He had no money. He had no passport. He had nothing. So we carried coffee, food, a book to read. You can guess what the Ziplocs or milk cartons were used for, because there were no bathroom facilities. Of course, later in life, 25 years after that, I got to cross the ocean with 4 engines, 2 HFs, a GPS, 4 pilots, 3 inertial nav systems, 18 flight attendants, 8 fuel tanks, and CPDLC. So things have come a long way. Would I do it again? Would I do it now? No. Some of these flights, I'll just mention a few. People say, did you have any issues on these flights? Generally, no. They were pretty routine. They were new airplanes, good engines. I did refuse 2 airplanes, one for electrical issues, one for radio and engine issues. Let's see. Just looking down through this list. I had a fuel problem at the Navajo. I couldn't get any fuel when I finally switched to the tanks. I couldn't get any fuel out of the wing tanks, out of the left wing tank. And that was my reserve. So I landed in Shannon, a little bit wing heavy. The left wing was full and the right wing was close to empty. I took a couple of airplanes with no autopilot. That was really awful. One, I had a 16-and-a-half-hour flight to Geneva. The weather was so bad in Ireland I couldn't land. Usually the weather in Ireland was bad on the East Coast or the West Coast. You could either land Shannon or Dublin. In this case, both were down. And I had enough fuel, and I just refiled in the air and went on into Geneva, 16 hours and a half. I do remember when I got on the ground being too tired to sign my name, basically, just exhausted. Not exactly safe. I took an airplane to Germany just in time for Oktoberfest. I took one down to Munich and spent a week at Oktoberfest. So there were some good benefits. Next slide. There we go. The one time I had to return to Gander due to icing. We all did. We couldn't get above it. Normally you could, above 9,000 feet, get above it. And then I had a beautiful Brit Dorman Islander that I picked up at Isle of Wight and brought back.
Lynn, Alan Norris has a question for you.
Oh, boy.
What's the name of the book a ferry pilot in that period wrote? Do you know?
Louise Sackey, called Ocean Ferrying. Louise Sackey was a legend. She had over 300 crossings. She flew all the bonanzas. They loved her and hated her at the same time. She was a tough lady. Yeah, Ocean Ferrying, and Louise Sackey, S-A-C-C-H-I. And there was another one written by a friend of mine. There are a couple of them out. There are actually several. You can find them all. My last crossing was to Germany. And we all went out and did a lot of drinking. And since then, I haven't been able to deal with schnapps at all. Can't drink it. You can see my total time over there was 570 hours over water time in those hours. And that's my story. It was an interesting time, and I do appreciate you letting me come and tell this story again. I had to dig this out. Like I said, it feels like another lifetime. It's so old. But it was an interesting time, and in a lot of these ferry pilots, we've kept in touch, and we've had a couple of reunions. Usually it's Sun and Fun. Thank you. John, it's yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Lynn. And I take full responsibility. I will check the batteries in the future. So we're still learning at this, and Lynn had a wireless mic, batteries went dead. She had a remote clicker for the slides, battery went dead. And guess who owns both of those pieces of equipment? That'd be me. Matt, next slide, please. We weren't supposed to have to do this, but next slide, Matt can do it.
Hang on.
Yeah, I know.
There we go.
So anyway, that was Lynn's thank you. That's Stinson, obviously. Next one, please. Oh, yeah, stay tuned. We'll be sending out some more emails about what to do, what Chapter 288 is going to do as far as more virtual meetings, gatherings if we can. Please send me some more pictures and write-ups of your interesting toys, like Rick's RV-15R. Any toys you have like that would be interesting for the rest of the chapter to share. And I think there's just one more slide. I'm surprised Alan Norris only had a question.
No, I have a question.
Oh, you have a
I
question.
have a
Go
question.
ahead.
Can you please choose a different color? Because I don't know what the heck that is. That's like a boomer color going on there in the background of your slides.
Did you call me a boomer?
I called you a boomer.
I think you called me a boomer. Anyway, thanks, Chapter 288, for all you do. Thanks again, Lynn. That was a great presentation. Greg, thanks for your presentation and your help with the Ray Scholar. Hey, everybody, fly safe. Look out for one another. Have a great night. Good night, everyone.